everyone. My name is Reverend Tiffany Morrison, and I'm welcoming you to Rethinking Church Dating and Ministry Part 2. Looking for love. It's been a long time since we've been here, but we're glad to be back. It is going to be a great discussion. We have some amazing women that we're going to just have a little girl chat and talk about what dating looks like in this season. Ooh, praise God. And for those of us that might be involved in ministry, we're not talking about, being a pastor, but if you're called to lead in your respective church or faith-based community, what does dating look like for you and how are we going to navigate these waters? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves and where they're from, where they're representing. So again, my name is Reverend Tiffany Morrison. I'm an assistant pastor of a church here in New York, St. Charles Amy Zion Church in Spark Hill, New York. And I've been a lifelong Amy Zionite for I won't tell you how many years. Now I'm going to throw it to Reverend LaKesha, who's our amazing leader.
Hey y'all, I am Reverend LaKesha Womack, and I am the founder of Rethinking Church, and I'm so excited to be here with some of my girlfriends, and we're jumping into the fire because none of us really talk about like our dating life. So when Reverend Tiffany said she wanted to have this conversation, I was like, let's talk about it. Let's see what the girls have to say. So I'm gonna pass it over to Martinique.
Hello. My name is Martinique Mix, and I represent the AME Church. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, which is our 6th Episcopal District. I go to Big Bethel AME Church. I'm currently serving as the Episcopal District Director of Lay Activities. I'm the former connectional president of our young adult component, and in real life, I do graphic design. So that's me.
Oh, hi, my name is Amina McIntyre, Reverend Amina McIntyre. I am in the 6th Episcopal District of the CME Church, and I am based in Atlanta, Georgia, but I'm also in Nashville, Tennessee quite a bit. And I also am a former young adult president, which is how the three of us met. And we have talked about quite a few things, but we definitely haven't talked publicly about a lot of, even the subject we're talking about tonight. I was like, oh, wait, we're going to talk about that publicly? I guess let's get into it.
No, awesome sauce. I thank you guys in advance for having this conversation with us. I thank you for your vulnerability. But in all seriousness, even myself being out there's a lot of people looking and a lot of people out there. And I think that sometimes we're not necessarily seeing what we want or feeling what we want, but we don't talk about it either. And so we need to start creating these spaces to have some real conversations like, okay, well, what does it look like for you? So that leads to our first question. This is going to be easy but hard. In no more than 3 sentences, you must describe or define dating in 2023. I'll start because I have a saying that I've been using. I make Reverend LaKesha chuckle every time I say it. If dating were a body of water, I would say there might be sharks in it and a little pee in the water too. There's a little bit of a mix of things happening, but I'm still going to get in and try anyway. So that's how I describe dating right now. Martinique, how do you describe dating in 2020?
I think I described dating like I was talking to somebody and you have to decide what you want. Do you want the mall food court or do you want an actual restaurant?
Ooh, I like that. The mall food court or a restaurant. Ooh, Reverend LaKesha.
I would describe dating as like challenging. I think like that's the word that comes to mind. And I think it's because like as you get older, your tolerance and like the things that you're willing to accept are just like a lot fewer. And so it just becomes more challenging because you're just not really willing to put up with as much as you did at one point in life.
Oh, I like that. Challenging. Reverend Amina, please.
Right. So this is going to be completely different because I don't actually think people know what dating is. I don't think we have actually defined what dating looks like. A lot of our ideas of dating goes on like older courtship models, where we were actually dating to be in partnership, to become married in order to produce, because obviously also, especially for women, how far you got in life often depended on who you married and who you became in partnership with. And now I think that we're doing everything from auditioning people to to just trying to like have companions to traditional some people are just wanting to just have regular I think they just like have extended friendships and some intimate relationships. But I don't think that even we really understand what dating actually is in the level and the scale of dating. But for me, honestly, dating is really getting to know somebody, either for the possibility of um, going further and having deeper relationships, or it could just be for the purpose of having companionship because this life and adulting is hard. And so I think just people have different things. And so for me, I don't think that people really actually, I don't think I can describe dating because I don't think I really know what dating is for people right now. And I think that our ideals of dating are just based off of older models.
I think that's a really good point because a lot of times, like you said, people don't know what they want going in, and so you find yourself like on like two dates, and all of a sudden like you go together, and you're like, hold up, like we only like went out to eat like two times. Like, how are we in a relationship? And then the other person really doesn't even want a relationship, but they just want like that attachment. So then like by date 5 they've like changed their mind, but then and it just becomes like real like cloudy and convoluted, and you're just like, let's just be friends and get to know each other. And I think that dating is like a part of that. But yeah, dating is challenging. I'll go back to my statement.
But no, but you know what? I would say this on the flip side. One of the blessings of dating for me in this season is that it's challenging in the sense that yes, you're not necessarily seeing what you want because you're not making any concessions. But I'm like, thank you, God, I know what I want. That this is not 20-year-old Tiffany that was just kind of out there flying. Like this is, I won't say how old I am, Tiffany, but I have some standards and I have some expectations. And so also it helps me a little bit to say, okay, you gotta be this tall to ride this ride. We're not hitting it. And I'm okay. Like I can decipher and discern and say, you know what, we can't have this conversation because no matter how I define dating, like just the basics of being in my presence, you may not be there. We can be cool, but coming into that space and saying, I'm going to spend exclusive time with you over somebody else, you got to be this tall to ride this ride. So I'm kind of excited in that way because I can say that. Not a lot of people can say that, okay, this is what I want and this is what I don't want. And I think the other thing that you talked about defining dating, Reverend Amina, I think one of the things we have to talk about is intentionality. And that even if all you want is friendship or all you want you're dating to be married, like there's an intention behind it. And I find that sometimes if I cannot decipher the intention, then I'm also kind of like, you know what, I'm good. So at least because we can't even have a basic conversation about where we're going, even if it's just friendship, that's cool. But are you intentional and can you actually verbalize what you're looking for? I see the head nods.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
I definitely will add to that because I think there's also too this element of understanding that at one point people were actually taught this is what a relationship is and this is how you're supposed to operate in a relationship. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that a lot of those roles were problematic and at least how a lot of them were presented. But the point is that I think at one point, those particular conversations were being had, and now they're not being had. And so even that intention and having that intentionality can sometimes go out the window because some people are like, oh, well, I've never even was introduced to what this looks like, or anything to me that a relationship looks like is toxic, or everything I saw that was marriage is like 50, 70 years. And so now you're like, well, I'm going to be trying to always look for whatever that was. And then it comes up with the new idea of I have to have everything together in order to be able to date, or to be able to make a commitment. And then now all of a sudden everybody's getting married and having kids at like in their 40s. So it's like there is, I think that, I mean, even too, I wonder, yeah, I mean, I just often think about like intention. It's like, what do people even know how to say this is what intention looks like? Because at one point we were taught this is what this looks like, or at least for us. And now that's not it. Now it's so fluid and it's so open that I think that giving people more suggestions and more possibilities is actually confusing people more.
Yeah, that's good. That kind of goes into another question that I've been thinking about too is that as we're starting to talk about this, at least in 2023, that's the other thing too. I think dating has to be present. Like it can't always, you can't always go from a frame of reference of what happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Things have shifted so much that you have to kind of be present and forward thinking when you're dating, because you also don't want to carry baggage. I know that might be a whole nother conversation after this, but what has been some of the issues or setbacks that you've experienced in dating this season? Anybody can start.
Um, well, I think a lot of times people don't know what type of relationship they want, really. I think a lot of people think that, like we're talking about, when Reverend LaKesha was talking about, we're dating like after two dates, right? But when they don't know what dating is versus what courting is versus what talking is versus what hanging is, like they automatically put titles on things that they're not. So like really in this season, because people don't know what the definition is, they think everything is dating, right? And like it's not. So the hardest part is really just trying to find someone who really uses the same language as you and has the same understanding of what dating is, because they might be like, okay, well, they're talking about friends with benefits and they're like, oh wait, we're dating, but we're not. So I think that is the hard, because trying to find people who want that, and then trying to find people who have the same goals, because every woman's goal is not to get necessarily to get married, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't have a long-term relationship and still have goals that would be close to marriage but not in the same thing. So I think it's really that we have to learn definitions so that even dating or courting or whatever we call it can be better in this season, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that Angela just made a great point, like how it's different for women versus men also. Because like as a woman, it's like if you go out, or if you're even thought to have gone out with like 2 or 3 people, then all of a sudden, people are making assumptions about your character. But then it's like, but if you don't go out with a couple of different people, then how do you choose? Like, how do you know who you want to be with? And so it's almost like you have to watch people from afar, and then you just kind of like pick one. And then like what happens if you pick the wrong one? Like you kind of like stuck with that one. And then that leads to a whole different issue. But men, they kind of go out and hang out and do what they want to do, and like nobody ever says anything, or they might like make jokes about them being out with different women, but it doesn't impact their ability to get a new appointment or to get a new assignment or to be promoted. Whereas with women, it's like we're having to constantly like watch who we're seen with and who we're out with, so that we can maintain our character for the sake of our ministry. And I think that that's a little unfair. I don't think people should make assumptions about your character just because like you want to date, because just because you're dating someone doesn't mean you're having sex with them.
Yeah. And I'd love to add to that, because I think also, so I've just been notoriously very closed and tight-lipped about who I date and how I'm dating. And I am always dating. I'm currently in a relationship, and even with that, it's just like my relationship it's not that my relationship is not public, it's just not for the whole world to consume. Largely because especially being a woman minister who is not married, there are also a lot of other things that kind of come up in terms of the expectations of who you should be dating and how you should be dating them. For a while, there were people who were trying to pair me up with other pastors. For a while, there were people that the conversation around arrangement was very, very real about, okay. And then it became okay, well, now she's a certain age and she's not partnered. And so all of a sudden I realized that I didn't get invitations to places that my male counterparts would get invitations to. And so that was also a very other real conversation, as if to say, okay, well, since you're not with somebody and we don't see that, then we can't trust a certain level, or there can be an implication. And I'm just like, I mean, you can invite me and my counterpart. It's just that I'm not going to introduce them into a space that I feel like you all won't hold that with some sort of with some sort of care and intimacy, because you're not going to know all of my information. You're not going to know all my business. But all that to say too, for me, and I will just kind of bring this up 2023. I've been watching some things recently about like how people are dating. And I'm just like, Lord, if I end up being single again, like, I don't know, because I met my partner through a friend. And we met in person. And so all of our interactions have been in person, but there's online dating now where you can go. And I've definitely been on a couple of dates with people who I met online. And we had um, the kind of introduction coffee thing. And I won't even talk about that, but it was wild.
I remember what you're talking about.
Oh, it was wild. I was just like, oh, I'm so glad we only drank like Coke here, because this would have been a really, really big waste of your time and my time and all of our money had this been a much more expensive day. But there's also the dates now where like you just kind of go into, like, you both meet at a place, you don't say anything to each other, you just see if you like people, and then you leave and you don't ever talk to each other. And so there's all these different kind of elements of things that have kind of popped up too. For me, I'm just when I talk about dating, I'm an old school, let's go out. And I also don't think I feel like I'm talking a lot now, but you're going to laugh. I don't think that dinner is a date, because I feel like dinner is an easy, let's just go get something to eat. I can eat all the time. And quite honestly, you can gain a lot of weight by dating, by just eating. What other experiences can we have that are outside of our normal realm of possibility, that we can kind of see how we grow and get deeper and understand each other more? And so for me, I'm looking for experiences that can also enrich us, to see how we can continue to build our lives. Because I want to see what you like outside of the food that you just picked. And I want to see what our relationship looks like outside of church. And I want to see what our relationship looks like outside of us sitting on your couch or sitting on my couch or whatever we're doing here. So I want to know what experiences enrich you. And I really would love it if you have a passport. That's a thing for me that I care about. But all of those, I just wanted to kind of put out those things that I have kind of thought about, or at least have come up for me in my dating life and in the work that I'm doing, and me trying to find a partner that lasts for whatever the partnership looks like.
You know, you said something like really interesting, and it brought back some of the dates that I've been on where guys feel, compelled to share their philosophy about women in ministry. And you're kind of like, but like, I'm a woman in ministry, and they're just like, I don't believe in women preachers, or I don't believe that women. And it's just like, so you're essentially telling me that you don't believe in the call that God has placed on my life. Like, so what do you think is going to happen after this? Like, you think we're going out again? Like, you think we have a future? But it's just like, and I think like that further complicates it, because you can meet a guy and everything is good, and you're like, oh yeah, and I'm involved in the church. And then all of a sudden, like, they get really, really weird.
That's why I'm upfront with it. Like, I literally am like, yes, I'm a minister. I'm going to sit. Oh, what do you do? And I actually talk about the ministries I do. I'm very upfront, like, yes, and I'm very close with my pastor. If this is an issue, that's fine. And some have been like they've embraced it. They've welcomed it. I've actually, someone I'm talking to is a minister. So it's really great because we kind of vibe and understand the process. And some others, it's like, I don't know how to handle that. Like, I'm intimidated by that, or I'm concerned about that. I don't want you to judge me. I'm like, the other thing I think that, yes, I'm a woman in ministry, but the other operative word in that phrase is I'm a woman. Yeah. And so that's Jesus is with me. God is with me everywhere I go. But when I'm with you in this season for dating, what it looks like for me is that I don't want to be Pastor Tiffany. I want to be Tiffany. And so I need to have a space where I can do that. So if you're already approaching me like, you're trying to deal with me with kid gloves, I'm already like, oh, here we go. Like, I have to be like Pastor Tiffany in this context. And I think that for me, I don't necessarily want that. I just want to be myself with no titles, like two people getting to know each other. And yes, that's where I can cook. I love to cook. I love to bake, so I can eat. That's good. But are you willing to go to Six Flags with me and get on all the roller coasters? Let's talk about it. Are you willing to, go to a comedy show? Can we laugh? I love UFC. I love MMA. Can we go see a match? I want to be outside as well, because I think also when you're involved in ministry, most of us that are involved in ministry, we're also very, I don't want to say busy, but we do have a lot of things going on. So we want to have that place to have an outlet and to enjoy ourselves and get to know people. And so if it's always about, oh, I can't talk to her, or I can't do this with her because she's a minister or a pastor, I'm like, then this is not gonna work. Like, this is not gonna work for me. And I also love what you said about having the same language and understanding, Martinique. Because, for example, I was talking to someone, and literally all they do is text. That might be your language. That's good for you. But I do appreciate a conversation every now and again, knowing that you're alive, right? And that we could do more than texting, and that we can go outside. No, I'm not sitting at your house every day. You're sure enough going to come to my house every day. We need to have something outside of that, and being able to develop and being around each other. Like, that's okay. And again, us fellas feel the same way. Well, okay. Well, then can we talk about that a little bit? About communication. That brings up a good thing. So how do you start to have some of these conversations about what it is that you do like and what it is that you don't? And as women, just saying this, do you feel comfortable enough to have those conversations and not necessarily be judged in that dating moment?
Um,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to start off by saying it took me a second, because at first I was definitely, even in my current relationship, it was just like, okay, well, I'm one of those people. I want to talk to you in the morning, talk to you in the around noonday. I want to talk to you in the evening. I mean, even if I'm busy, like, it don't have to be like a full on conversation, but I want to have a conversation in the morning, and we can text throughout the daytime. I want to have a conversation in the evening. But I was dating somebody who worked for a living on the telephone. So you don't want to have a conversation. You don't want to be on a phone after a certain time, because he's had like his telephone quota for the week. But if we FaceTime, or if we're in person, then he's got time and capacity for that. And so it took us a few months, but then I was just like, well, let's just have the conversation. How do you communicate? Because I need these things from communicating, and I'm getting frustrated with you because I don't feel like I have these things in our communication. And then he was like, well, this is how I communicate. And I was like, okay, so, and we had to have I was like, okay, look, I need to hear from you in these ways by these times in the daytime. Otherwise, I'm gonna come looking for you and be like, are you okay? And also too, I partially understood that some of that fear was because we've actually had a situation in my family where somebody went missing. And so we didn't realize that they were missing, because we were like, we just knew that they weren't always, they just weren't always as responsive. And so for now, all of my family ends up having these check-ins that we need to do. And so I just had to slam up. So I need to check in. And he was like, okay, you need to check in. Well, this is how I need to operate. So we decided how our check-ins would work so that I could get what I needed out of the communication, that he would get what he needed out of communication. And then also when we started having longer or deeper conversations about other things that were heavier issues, we would just have to be honest and say, hey, you know what? I'm squeamish about this part. And so it might take us some time to kind of warm up to where we need to be to have the fuller conversation. But I just want to acknowledge that I'm having a hard time having this particular conversation in this way. So why don't we maybe like talk it through a different kind of way, or just say, hey, we need to have the conversation today, or we'll text it out a little bit and then kind of have the conversation. But we've done a variety of different ways of trying to attempt to communicate. But at first it just took us a while, because we were like, we got to get on the same page about what our communication needs were, so that we could both be satisfied by the end of the day.
Yeah, I think what Reverend Amina said is definitely true. I think for me, like, because when you have different seasons, and then you're talking to people who are not maybe in the same season as you, they communicate differently. But then when you get to know yourself, when you get to understand, this is how I communicate, this is what I need to communicate, or like for me, when I'm mad, like I might have a short fuse, so I'm gonna get mad. But if you give me 15 minutes, then I'm okay. So I like to communicate with people early on, like, hey, I might get mad and I might need to walk away. I have time, but I tell them that because I know what kind of person. So I usually in the beginning sort of start to, pull out different types of communication or different things that I know that I need specifically for myself. Because I was telling somebody, I don't like to be misunderstood. So because of that, I go out of my way to make sure that that person is understood. And so I need them to be able to do the same thing for me. So I, tell them like, listen, I need you to listen to what I'm saying, right? And I need someone who knows, like, I have to tell people like, when I'm tired, I can't communicate. So really trying to, I think the first thing that we have to do as just women, or just people in general, is to know our style of communication, to know what are our triggers, and then how do we tell other people what our triggers are and how we communicate them. Because sometimes we'll have triggers and we don't actually know how to communicate them, and people will, they'll be around us and they'll be like, well, why are they giving me the silent treatment? So really using our words, I know it sounds like so elementary, but using our words and being able to put our emotion into words that other people can understand is really the most important thing I think that we have to deal with. I just want to go back to something else Reverend Amina said real quick, is that when you were in the church for real, when you get a certain age, like 26 or 30, depending on your young adult and your youth department, when they believe that you should be somewhere off getting married and having children, they really will stop inviting you. You really will feel this disconnect. Like, okay, how old are you now? You don't have no kids. You're not married. Are you dating? Then you definitely have this other way that they sort of communicate. So I just wanted to just go back to that. But yes, communication and just knowing your style is really key because you can't tell somebody what you don't know yourself.
So I'll say I'm probably like on the opposite end because I'm a texter. Like I don't like talking on the phone. And so for a long time, like I really thought like you could have a successful relationship by text message. And I realized that, guys are kind of like, us, like, they want time. Like they actually like want to be around you. Like who knew? And I realized that, just having like text relationships like that wasn't sufficient. It wasn't like a real relationship. And so I think for me, like I have to be intentional about making time because I'm so busy working and doing other things that it's like, oh, I got a good morning text, I got a good night text, like, oh, we good. And it's like, no, like you're really not good. And so I think that, having like communication is important because now I'm in a place in my life where I want someone to share my life with. Like I want somebody to talk about like the things that are going really well, or if I'm having a bad moment, like I want that. And I think that as Amina and Martinique have said, like you have to be honest about what you need and how you want to communicate in order for it to be successful. And you have to be open to the other person sharing like what they need. Like Amina said, like some people, like if they work on the phone all day, like they might not want to talk. So it's like, all right, once a week we're going to have like a Zoom date night, or we're going to make time to go out. But I think it's important to set that up and not to just assume that, what you like is what the other person likes as well.
No, so Reverend LaKesha knows this too. I am not, I don't like texting because I'm always on the go. And also, I like my nails. I'm a text, and I'm not gonna lie. When you have nails, you sometimes miss the words or misspelled. Like a whole lot of stuff can get lost in translation. Someone said texting will have you all the way messed up. So I am that person that does like to talk. And so I found that some people also use text as feelers to see where you're at. Well, guess what? You're gonna miss me because I probably didn't even see your text, and you're like, it's been 6 hours and she hasn't said anything because literally I'm not looking at my phone. Now, if you call it, I'll pick it up and I will make the 10 minutes of the time to say, hi, how you doing? But that comes with that compromise and understanding where people are. One interesting thing that someone did with me, because they knew that I was busy. Someone says so non-engaging. Yes, there's a continuum. Something that one person did for me and I really liked it is that he knew that I was busy throughout the day. He's like, are you going to eat lunch? I was like, yes, I'm going to try and do lunch. He said, let's do a Zoom lunch date. I'm gonna get my lunch, you get your lunch. And we literally sat there and I actually took a lunch. Normally I don't. And so I sat there and had lunch with him. And so I'm like, thank you. You're trying to meet me where I'm at. But it has to be somewhere in the middle. Because if it's all texting or all phone, it's like somebody's gonna get lost. And I also think with texting, sometimes tone gets lost in it. So you really could be like, hey, how you doing? And you sincere, but if there's no punctuation, like, do I know if you're happy about it, if you're sad about it, or you just trying to do, like, sometimes I need to hear your voice because I need to hear the tone. And I can tell just within a few seconds if you're having a good day or a bad day, and that might just wreck my conversation with you. I can't get all of that through a text. Um, which leads to something else that texting catfishes emotions. I like that. That's a good thought. I'm gonna write that down. Yes. um, so let's talk a little bit about boundaries. I think we touched on it a little bit. I heard you, Reverend Amina, when you're talking about like everything is not for everybody, but then also starting to set those boundaries with that person that you're dating. So I think there's boundaries with the outside world and how much you share, but then there's also boundaries in that relationship. So, however your mind or your spirit moves you, just talk about how you had to think about setting or resetting boundaries in this season in either avenue. Anybody can
Okay.
Let's just start that one.
I would say, I think setting boundaries is, again, knowing yourself first, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think we're older, not like old, but we're older women on here. And I know that what I know about myself now is completely a different person and who's more comfortable with myself. And so I know the things that I like and I know the things that I don't like. And I know how to say it in words. So then when I'm telling someone like, hey, listen, there's a lot of things you can do, but don't do this and that, right? And saying it in a way that it's not that I'm trying to be your mother or like figure it that way, but as a person, as someone who you see this light in, I need you to understand, like, if you take me there, that's the darkness, right? You don't want to see that darkness. So I think that really understanding what your boundaries are and not just like things that you let upset you, like things that actually can really trigger you, can really because there can be small things that if you think about it, you're like, okay, that really doesn't bother me, but then there's some other things that really will bother you, and you have to you have to know them for yourself. A lot of times we don't know what really is triggering. We might think it's one thing when it's really another. So really understanding what it is before you really have that conversation with your other person. And then also understand when you're telling someone your boundaries, you need to understand how they receive information, right? Because a lot of times, we're talking to somebody and we don't realize that, maybe they don't receive information the way that we do. So we need to say it in a way that they can understand. We need to maybe you got to use analogies. Maybe you have to say, okay, when you do this, I don't like it. Or when it actually happens, say, hey, whatever happened last night, I just want to let you know, like, when this happened, it made me feel like this. Mm-hmm. And in the future, I would like for us to have a conversation before we go into that type of situation. So I think that you really have to know your boundaries and then know a form of communication that the other person will receive.
Well, I guess I'll jump in. So for me, I think boundaries are a little different, and this is probably RJ that said this. So this is girl talk tonight. We're gonna have a panel with the guys, but tonight we're having girl talk. So feel free to comment and share what you're thinking. But I think when I think about boundaries, for me, it's more about, and I think it goes back to my earlier comment about just the perception that people have about when you're dating. And so that has informed a lot of the boundaries that I have as far as like, we're not taking pictures and posting them on social media together. You're probably not coming to like any like church events with me. Like I've set like those types of boundaries to kind of protect like myself and my reputation. But then on the flip side, like I realized like I've also been choosing the church over myself by doing that, because I've missed out on some experiences that I possibly could have had because I was so concerned about what the church would think and what other people would think about me dating, and not just being like, hey, this is who I'm dating and it's okay. And whatever else is happening is none of your business. And I don't think that we're kind of at a point where we say that enough and that we affirm that in other people who are dating, which creates like this culture of, oh, you can't be out in public with people, instead of just being like, hey, like, they're dating and that's okay. And they might not be together 3 months from now. They might not be together a year from now. They might be together for the next 25 years. Let's all practice minding our business and let that person find their happiness. So I'm kind of like on the fence with the whole boundaries, because I think a lot of my boundaries have been created not because of what was comfortable for me, but trying to make other people comfortable with my life decisions.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Because for me, I'm really thinking a lot about how to, with having boundaries, is how to keep my life in harmony. Because just and we're a unique group of people because when, especially even when we all met, and the way that we've been talking about how we do church is because we do church on a connectional level, not, it's just it, and it's a different life to have connection, like to be active on the connection, and then also having a personal life with that, because of the amount of times that you're in and out of town, the amount of times that you're at places, the amount of things that you're doing. And so for me, one of the things that I've had to really kind of think about in terms of being and making sure that I have harmony in my relationship is saying, hey, I have things that I have to do for church, and this is when I have to do things for church. But if your birthday's coming up, I will choose your birthday over the church. If and also too, don't ever think that I am so busy that you and I can't find the time to say, hey, because you are my priority. So part of me is just saying, okay, with my boundaries, these are my priorities. I'm not going to I'm gonna say sometimes I need my me time and my God time. That is a higher priority than us being together. But outside, I mean, and that's not the same relationship as being active in the church. That is my personal God time and my personal enrichment time and the things that God has for me to do in terms of my calling. And then is, hey, so you and I, we have a date night, regular date night, but we also have things that we have to do to nurture our own selves and nurture our own relationship. And so saying, okay, this is what we need in order to do that, but also to having someone who understands, hey, now when I have a church conference, we might have to talk about what church conference or church life looks like. And you may not get all those crazy phone calls that I normally get throughout the week. And you might be like, oh, she didn't even text me back. We were voting and the voting went a little long, but just know that it's just for this week that this voting went long. And so I think all that I'm trying to say is just like, kind of echoing what both LaKesha and Martinique have said in terms of saying, hey, we have obligations in terms of life, we have obligations in terms of things, but if we're in relationship and if we're trying to date, then we're going to take care of ourselves, and then we're also going to take care of you in our relationship. But we also, in saying that we're going to do that, then I want you to also honor what we have put into place that works for us. And if things kind of slip, then we need to have a different conversation, because I think also too, if it gets to that point where we're just like, okay, so now you're putting extra pressure on me and I have extra other pressure, then maybe we need to all have a conversation about all of our little pressure points here and find out how this is actually all going to work. But also too, even with that, I will say one of the things that I've had to kind of understand is to say, okay, what are my negotiables and what are my non-negotiables? Like, this is, it might be negotiable for me to say, hey, you know what? Well, maybe we have date night once or twice a week. Great. Okay, cool. Maybe that's a non-negotiable for us in order for us to do some sorts of things to make sure that we're still nurtured. But also too, we may not be able to have it's the middle of the summertime. We can't have date nights once or twice a week, but you'll get it back a little later on because of what we're doing and where we are. And so, but I think that I think it's really just kind of a conversation of saying that whatever is allowing me to be my most full self and making sure that we're not losing ourselves, so that I'm not demanding for you to be giving over and beyond more in order to make me feel watered, and that I'm not giving all of myself away in order to make you feel as if you're a whole person, that we kind of respecting ourselves together as humans. I think that is the biggest part.
No, I love all of what you're saying. And going back to what Reverend LaKesha was talking about, I think that it kind of goes back to intentionality and also feeling as though that you have, I don't want to say control, but you're controlling your narrative and what this season looks like for you. And I think that for me, what I struggle with sometimes is not necessarily the boundaries, but being able to have that accountability structure, because you feel as though if you tell somebody something, that they're judging you or they're putting something out there, and it's like, no, I'm coming to you and I'm telling you, like, hey, I might be dating this person or I might be here, because I also am sensitive enough to knowing that I'm a minister. And so I just want to have an accountability partner. I want to have a friend in this. I want somebody also, I'm just being honest about me, that sometimes I like to go to my peers and say, can you pray with me? Can you help me through? I'm thinking through something. I want to make sure that I'm okay. But if I'm coming to you and there's constantly some type of angst or concern, or there's not a trust there, yeah, I don't really feel as though I have to tell anybody anything, and I'm not going to. But definitely, I think boundaries around, relationships, and then also boundaries with, you guys were kind of taught. I have not had this experience because previously I was married, so they did not do the matchmaking and have these rules and regulations. But I also had to have boundaries in place then, and now I really do have to have boundaries in place, because it's like, well, what happened, or why are you here, why are you there, I'm like, listen, no, like I have to put, like, as a minister, I got to put some boundaries around those types of conversations, because if it's not going to help me grow, and if it's not going to help me be my fullest self, as Reverend Amina said, then I don't have to speak about it. And if you're not going to be praying for me or encouraging me, and if you think you see me with so and so, as much as you're going to be gossiping about it, I'm going to need you to put some prayer on it so that I can actually be in a healthy and whole relationship. Let's talk about that. Stop praying or talking about my downfall, but pray for my victory. Pray for my healing. And so I think that for me, when I think of boundaries, I think about a protectiveness around myself, as well as around the relationship that I'm hoping is going to grow. And hopefully it's not going to grow with some weeds and some thorns in it, because now you guys have started putting your seeds of hate, of doubt, of concern, of judgment, and forgetting that maybe 10 years ago you was out here all the way and you didn't have dating apps. So you was really outside trying to find somebody, but you got your person. So now you think you can sit in the place of judgment. We're not doing that. But okay, anyway, I digress. I might be telling what happened to me, but I think it's a real conversation to have around boundaries and accountability. Yeah, they be praying on you more than they be praying for you. Yes, RJ Stevenson, please pray for me.
Yeah. No, I just love the fact that you talk about the fact that we have the privilege, and we should be granted the privilege to be outside. Just let us be outside. Let us live. I appreciate you saying that, because what I do when I'm not on your time is what I do when I'm not on your time.
And to be honest, we're not on the time most of the time anyway. Like, yes, we are leaders in our church, and we're probably in church more than Sunday from 11 to 2. We already know that. But the majority of our lives is not lived in the church building, nor is it lived doing church things. Like, we are a whole human being. We are women. We are people. And so there has to be a level of letting us be outside, if you will. It's not even for you to let me be outside. If I've spoken to God about it, if I prayed about it, if I have my council of elders and they said, go ahead, sis, then I'm going to go ahead. So we have to talk about that too, about, we date with wisdom, we date with intentionality, but if it doesn't jive with everybody, that's okay too. But I do reserve the right to go outside, and we're going to talk about sources of dates. So let's get into that. So we talked about it a little bit, right? We said that we're outside. Someone said they were on the app. Yes, I'll tell the truth. My niece made a app. She made a profile for me, and I'm like, oh gosh, pray for this profile. But there's also events, and there's matchmaking, like literal matchmaking. There is a show on Netflix called The Matchmaker, Friend of a Friend. So what sources of potential dates have worked for you, and which ones you're like, ooh, that might not be for me?
So I'll start. So a long time ago, many moons ago, I did eHarmony and Match. And I will say I met two guys that I'm still like really good friends with to this day. Like, they were exceptional apps. However, I've tried like the dating apps in recent years, and going back to your statement, Reverend Tiffany, like, I don't know if it's pee in the water or if like their algorithms just aren't working, but I don't know, like the dating apps is just not, it's not where it's at for me anymore. I can't do it.
I think it's so interesting because like so my brother and my older brother and sister-in-law, they met on Black Planet. So for those who remember Black Planet, and when they met, they actually met just as friends on Black Planet, and then it evolved into more. And I mean, so yeah, so I've definitely done oh my God, many of the dating apps. And it's Lord. I don't even, it's not even just pee in the water with some of these apps. It's a lot more.
Right,
And
it's like
you
some
need to be
toxic
clean.
green waste or something.
Yeah, and I also know some folks who met folks on Craigslist and it worked out. But yeah, so I've definitely done the online thing. I've definitely done the hey, I have a friend who, but the one that I've preferred is saying, hey, you know what? I have a friend who I think might work for you. Let's all just have an informal conversation and an informal meeting. And if it works, then let it roll. But if it doesn't work, then there's no harm here or no foul. But also of course, the danger of that is if
Yeah,
I'm
if it
friends
doesn't
with
work.
you, if it doesn't work out, you
Yeah,
got to have a conversation with your friend. Be like, now, what was you thinking when you decided that this person could potentially be a good person for me?
or you
Um,
have to see them again at like the next event, and you're like, awkward.
We're like, we don't need the conversation. We're good. I mean, and I've also, so the other thing too is that, well, I guess I'll talk about that. Well, no, we won't talk about that part because we're not talking about that at the moment. We won't
Take
do
a
it.
mental note because we probably gonna catch it at some point, but write it down.
Okay, I'll write it down. I mean, but I've
Like,
definitely, I did do Facebook dating once. That was trash. It did not work. I mean, but even with that, I will say too, like, um, there's such an interesting element to even dating online now. It's just like, because when I did my dating app sequence, I used my Google Voice number to meet them. I didn't give them my real phone number, just for my own protection. So that I could say, hey, you know what, if this didn't work out, I don't want you blowing me up. I don't want, I don't want to do any of that. So that's another whole other kind of boundary to kind of come up. But my favorite one has been like meeting friends of friends with people. And very typically I've met people not inside the church that way.
Yeah, I would agree. I've really never done dating apps before, for a lot of reasons. I'm like really a reserved person, so I really do need like a friend of a friend or something, that kind of type situation. Or I'm the complete extreme opposite, where I can meet someone and have like a really good conversation, and then it's like, hey, what is this? You know? So there's like two different things, because I think that you can meet people, and especially like what you just said, the last part, like not church people, like like men sometimes, and I'm not saying all men, but I noticed for me that when they're at a certain level in the church, it's a different conversation than versus someone who, maybe just attends or maybe has worked in it. The way that they are able to appreciate me, and the way that we're able to vibe and have conversation. And so I've met people, I met men, and then we've had a conversation, and it was, it's turned into something. And then I've also, had people who try to put me with people. And like you said, like sometimes they try to put you with somebody and you're like, kind of like, okay, why did you think that person? Especially like sometimes they're younger than you, sometimes they're just drastically different. So you kind of look side eye because you're like, well, what do you think of me? So, not that they're a bad person, but just thinking of me and how I would, be with that person. So I think it is really weird because you do want somebody to put you with somebody, but you want them to know you enough to put you with the right person. And I think really a lot of times we need to have like you said, hangs where it's a group of people and you can have like honest conversation, right? And I think that like really we have to like be willing to be outside, but we also have to be like, this whole new thing what they say, the younger people say, like the soft girl era. Like we have to be willing to be, like we don't always get to be soft. Like when you're in leadership, you don't get to be soft. So like you're on these like dating things, like you're showing your softer side. And then they meet you in person, you're like, oh yeah, but I'm also a boss. I'm also being a pastor, a minister. So they see that other side. So like dating apps, they don't let you show your, versatility, like all the sides that you really have. So that's why I kind of like, it's really not for me,
Yeah, I would say somebody said it. A comment just came across that it might be hard to date someone out of your calling or your profession. And I might want to come back to that because I think that, again, yes, we have a calling and a profession, but God made us whole people. And so I'm not mad. Like, you have to help me to reach that goal. Like, you have to add to me, but I'm not like, oh, I'm a minister, or I'm a pastor, so therefore I need to marry a pastor. Like, I'm not. No, no. That's a whole nother conversation. That's not necessarily what I'm setting out for. I'm looking for my companion. I'm looking for my covering when I'm dating. Like, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm not thinking about like you have to have the same profession and the same calling as me. I'm thinking, do you have a profession? Do you have a calling? Yes, I'm a real person. RJ, I think we need to have you on the next side because clearly you have a whole lot to say about this topic. But I am a real person. I'm a whole person. And so my concern is not necessarily if you're a pastor or if you're in the same vein as me, but do you have one? And are you following it? Because if you're doing that, then that means that we could work together because we're not going to be stepping on each other. We're not going to be beating each other up. We're going to have grace for each other because we're both pursuing God and for what he's called us to do. I also will say that I can't hate on the dating apps too much because the person that I've allowed into my space in this season is kind of cool. I met him on a dating app. But I also will say that I've been at events. My niece, let me take a step back. My niece, she's a little younger than me, but she has the whole scene down. So she's like, honestly, I'm gonna help you out. You need a dating app. You're gonna meet the people on the apps. But as soon as she said that, within a couple of months of that, I've been going to different events and different things of that nature, and people just come up to me. I was like, so, okay, so maybe that old school of going places and meeting new people still does exist. And so I'm kind of excited about that because I would rather meet somebody in person and get to know them that way and vibe that way. But I have been blessed and fortunate enough to actually meet somebody on an app. I've also had some interesting people. Reverend LaKesha, I often tell, she knows a story about MC Gusto. Maybe that would be a whole nother talk on its own for another day. But there's definitely been some interesting characters on these apps. But I think that I'm open to meeting people in various ways. I just have my preference. I'm not going to shut the door and say, well, if it's a friend of a friend, but I will be honest. If it's a friend of a friend, like, do you have a picture? Is there a Facebook profile? Is there a LinkedIn profile? Just can I see something? Because I'm gonna let you know real quick. Like if I can't even make his face out from the picture or his tie's too tight, that just may not be for me. Like let me give a cursory glance before we do anything. Just a cursory glance. But go ahead, Reverend LaKesha. You were gonna say something.
No, I'm laughing at you about the ties too tight. But I do think that it's important. It's important for people to do like what they're comfortable with. And I am all for the, Googling somebody because like I went out with this one guy and I Googled him and like he had been charged with like an accessory to like murder or something. And he told me like the story like afterwards, but I'm just like, but if I hadn't Googled that and found it, like would you have told me about it? Like how long would it have been before we got to that story? So, the good old Google machine is like very helpful. You're muted, Amina.
Amina, you on mute.
Oh, I must have muted myself. I was open. But I think one of the things I do also kind of want to throw in is that especially women dating is a lot different than men dating, especially in ministry. And so I think, and I'm not saying that it's easier, but I will say that for men, they can do okay, well, I just want to be with somebody inside of my calling. But for many of us, especially women who are in ministry and women who are in leadership in ministry, it rules out a lot of people in a very specific kind of way, because if a guy cannot deal with the fact that you are in ministry, or a girl, or whatever your preference is, because there's a lot of spectrum now, but whatever your preference is, sometimes people can't handle it. And it is a very special conversation that we haven't had, because very often, even in our denominations, like I said, even when people have said, okay, I want to introduce you to somebody in the denomination, it was because, oh, you can help this person in their ministry. But I
Yeah.
got my own ministry.
Yes.
How then do we have that conversation that some of the spouses and the spouse lifestyle will include a man who's just as secure in their own life, and they have to be because we're the leaders, so they have to be even more secure than men typically need to be. So, and but very often those persons who are the most secure for us are not in the church, or they're people who can, I mean, kind of like deal a lot more in the secular world, but can be a part of the church, but are not necessarily prominent leaders within the denomination or in the church in general.
Yeah, because some of them are insecure, if we're being honest about it. So if we're talking about me being whole and complete and secure, I bring all of that, right? And then you're telling me I need to pair up with this particular pastor to help his ministry. But if he's not secure in who he is, all he's going to do is start to tear me down because he may see me as a threat, right? Let's be real,
Competition.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to uplift you and encourage you and edify you. But understand, I also have my own too. And most times, I've experienced this, just saying, that when I show up with all that I do have, it is intimidating. It's like, well, where do I fit in? Because it's not necessarily a material thing or a physical thing. There's something deeper that I'm looking for. And if you would take time to talk to Tiffany,
Mm.
not Pastor Tiffany, not Reverend Tiffany, not Tiffany, mother of Sam and Zoe, or Tiffany, whatever other title you give me, but just the woman Tiffany, you'd be like, yo, this woman she's dope. And I think that again, it comes back to conversation and intentionality. But we can't really get that far if the way that you're coming at me is because you're looking at me and you're trying to get something out of me because I'm in ministry. Oh, I could use this or I could use that. No, we've already started off the conversation wrong.
Yeah, and I think that, that's one of the things that as women, we're often seen as like the helper, and like guys don't always see themselves as like, but can you be my helper? Because it's like they feel like, the spotlight can only shine on them. And so even if your ministry might be more successful than theirs, like then it's like, oh well, you gotta dim that so that you can point your light on me and make my ministry more successful. And I had somebody tell me once, they're like, your ministry would be more successful if you had a husband. And I was like, so what is it exactly that he's bringing to the table? Or is it just the sheer fact that there's a man standing next to me that's supposed to make me more successful? But I think that there is like so much of like our talent that gets transposed to men. And that's one of the reasons why I've been hesitant to date publicly, because I know that especially if it's a successful man, whatever successes I have will be attributed to him. Not that I earned this for myself, but because she's with so and so, he got her that opportunity or he helped her to get this position, when more than likely I'm probably doing more to help him than he's doing to help me. But it's almost like you have to kind of navigate that when you're dealing with men in the church. So yeah, that can get real tricky.
I mean, I think as a lay woman, non-clergy woman, um, the thing is, people have told me for a long time. They told me, "Oh, you'll make a good first lady." When you're younger, it's like, okay, kind of maybe you think, okay, that's good. Like maybe that's a good thing, right? Somebody telling you make a good first lady, and because of all the things that you can do in the church, the way that you're able to talk, the way that you're able to handle yourself, that you can put programs together, you can do all of these things. But why is it that you only can see me as a first lady who can do something well versus I had to tell a man who's like my age or whatever. I had to tell him, like, when we were having a conversation, and me and another person were talking, and when we were finished the conversation, he told the young man, he was like, I really see you doing something really good in the church. You're going to be a good preacher. You can really go far. And then he didn't really say anything to me, and so I said, why did you just tell him? I said, we had a good conversation. You told me that I was smart and I knew a lot about the church. But you didn't tell me that you saw a future for me in the church. You only told the young man. Why do you feel like that is only, you can only attribute something to him? And I think that sometimes, even as even other women, we like, to each other, we don't even necessarily know that we can have position and we can still be, the lead person. And so I think that kind of attributes to dating, because we put other women in a box where it's like, okay, yeah, you can be great, but you can't be too great, because the men still have to be, greater, because of, just that. Even that's a whole other, conversation about how we see each other. But like setting each other in the box. But we really, just always telling lay women, you can be a good first lady, you can be a good first lady. But then the other side of that is, who is the man I'm supposed to marry that was supposed to be the pastor? Because if you didn't give me a man to marry that was a pastor, that was going to be a good pastor for me to be a good first lady to, why are you telling me something I can be, and then not giving me the way to actually be it? So, there's also the whole side of that. But for clergy women, I think there's this theory, and I believe it to be true, that if they're both persons are preachers, that one is better than the other. Like you rarely have a couple that both can preach. And it's hard, because when it's the woman that preaches better than the man, how she has to sort of bend that light. She has to be more the moon for him to be the sun. So there are a lot of times where people don't really understand, like, just because someone can do something better doesn't mean that it does it in a different way and people receive it more, doesn't mean that it dims your light. I think that is the other thing. Like, in dating, dimming light doesn't mean that just because you're the sun and the other person's the moon, or you're the moon and the sun, doesn't mean that you both don't shine. You just shine differently, right?
Yeah, the goal is to shine.
Right.
That's the whole part, is that the goal is to shine. And why can't we be both great together? Like, I don't want to have all this greatness and you barely making it in. Like, I want us both to be great. And then I think, again, it comes with intentionality in having that relationship, because also it ebbs and flows. There's seasons where I might be quiet and be sitting back and chilling, and there's seasons where you're just shining and you're doing the best, you're living your best life, and that's okay. It's just a give and take. But what I don't like, and I keep seeing it in the comments, is that's right. Like, I should not have to diminish myself in any way to be with you. If I'm doing that, then I'm already out of pocket with God. It's not even about with man and with other people. But I also think when you're older and you're dating, that I don't have time to waste anymore. I feel as though, for me in this season, God has given me a lot of talents. He's given me a lot of gifts. He's brought my name in places that I didn't ask for it to go. And so what am I going to say? Well, what happened was, Lord, when I was talking to so and so, he didn't want me to do this, or it didn't make him look good. So that's why I covered myself. He'd be like, wait a minute, but he didn't give you the gift. I did. I gave it to you. So I also think, for me in this season, that I'm really trying to stay connected and discerning with God, because I do not want to ever dim myself for somebody else, unless it's God given, because God can turn me up, he can turn me down, but that's who does it, but not you and your circumstances, because that's giving you a power and control that you really shouldn't have. Okay, I'm gonna be quiet, because so I agree with you, RJ. I'm just gonna need you next time, Reverend LaKesha. We just need to invite him on in, because he has so much to say. But yes, there is some of these conversations can be triggering, but this is why we need to have them, because I think there's so many people that are out there that are looking for relationships. If we're honest, that's why we have people on right now. That's all the songs in the world. I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that. But are we looking in the right way? Are we looking holistically at ourselves before we even look out? And are we having these conversations about triggers? I'm tired of being triggered by things. I don't want these things to have control and power over me anymore. So we have to have these conversations. Yes, let's get it right and move on. And move on in power, and like the people that you're with. Stop dimming yourself just so that you can say that you have somebody. No, we can't keep doing that. But that brings up another conversation. We've kind of been talking about it, but let's talk about it a little bit deeper. We've been touching on it. Dating as a woman in this season in ministry. We talked about the dimming of the light, but are there any other things that you feel as though that kind of makes it a little bit more, I don't want to say difficult, just that we might have to go about it another way because we are women in ministry or just women dating in this season? Is there anything else that has been resonating with you?
I think one of the things that I struggle with, and I think it goes back to the whole gifts conversation, is like the desire that some men feel that they need to possess you and they need to possess your power. And it's more of an ownership or a conquering and not necessarily a wanting you as that person. And I think that as a woman, sometimes like because you have like this desire to be in a relationship and to be wanted, you have to just be like extra discerning to be sure that the person wants you and it's not that they want to possess what you bring to the table. And so, and I think RJ asked one of the questions, like, what are you looking for? And I think like we've all kind of been sharing that it's like, someone who's authentic and someone who can see me as a person and not me as a brand or me as a ministry, but someone who sees me, not all the stuff that I do, but the funny me. Like most people don't know that I think I'm funny. Like, I like to laugh. But if you don't know me, like you don't know those parts of me and you only see like all of that extra stuff. And so I think to find a man who can truly like want to be with the person and not with the representative, because as much as guys complain about the representative, like some of them prefer the representative. Like they don't want to take the time to get to know who you are and the messy parts. Like Martinique said, like what makes me angry because I'm not always like happy go lucky. Like a lot of times like they don't want that. They want the show, they want the representative. So for me, it's like, being able to really find somebody who wants to go deeper in a relationship.
And shout outs really quickly. RJ, you asked another question that kind of goes into something that I was thinking about in terms of how should a guy approach a woman in ministry so you're not compromised. We're going to get to that. That can be the next question. But in terms of what we want, something that my first lady, Nicole McLaughlin put up, she has a book out called Dear Future Groom. I encourage everybody to read that because she answers some of these questions as well in there. But one thing she put is that, Dear Future Groom, please be a place of safety. That has resonated for me in this season, that I want to feel safe and I want to feel protected in my space with you. If I feel that any part of me is threatened by being in your presence, I don't want to be there. So I know for me, I'm looking for safety and I'm looking for peace. If there's no peace in our interactions, like if it always feels like it's a fight, or if it feels like it's something that we're pushing and pulling all the time, that there's not an ease to the conversation, the ease to the planning and how we move, that I don't want that. And so I think that again, being intentional, and we can talk about what safety really means. That might be a whole nother conversation as well. But I know what it means for me, and I know how I feel when I have safety and when I don't. And so, and also again, being able to have that conversation, like what you just said makes me feel objectified. What you just did makes me feel uncomfortable. What you just did makes me feel like I'm a possession and not a woman to be nurtured or to be covered. And so if I feel that way, I'm also not going to respond very well, because when a woman's back is against the wall, that part, then you see the other stuff that you may not like very much. But Reverend Amina or Martinique, anything on the question around women dating in ministry and being a woman? Anything else that we missed in terms of concerns?
I think I just want to raise up against something that's been raised up many times before at this point, is that I'm Amina. I got a lot of I got a lot of letters behind and in front of my name, but at the end of the day, I am Amina. And what does Amina need? Who is Amina? How does Amina have fun? How does Amina relax? How can I really be the most Amina that I can possibly be? And that, I mean, it sounds kind of cliche and odd, but one of the things that I've appreciated most in partners when somebody's just like, hey, so when's the last time you traveled for a vacation and not for work? Can we travel for a vacation?
Yes.
I mean, and knowing that part of that is also a part of the wholeness, that I need to be the best person that I can be. You know what I mean? Like if I have like my ratchet whatever moments, I mean, juveniles, back that thing up is 25 years old. And let me tell you, I don't care what letters are in front of or behind my name. If it comes on, we already know what time it is. Let's be real. I mean, and it is fine for me to be a woman in ministry who still understands how good it is to back that thing up, and that person appreciates me being able to back it up in any given time. I mean, so I think that part is I think just recognizing how much of a woman I am, and also too recognizing that because we have especially as beauty standards start shifting and going around, just saying like, what does woman look like to me, and how I show up as a woman, and that the way I show up as a woman, if you're not attracted to the way that I show up as a woman, just let it go. You know what I mean? Don't try to put certain standards on me because I'm this person, wherever. And because you can't consume my anointing, even if you're attracted to it, that's not for you to consume. So let's just how can we say that we are here and that I'm a whole person, and that I am, like, if you can't be just like, if we can't just sit back and like play space together, then I don't want it. So how do we do those things? And so I mean, but that's really it. The biggest thing for me is saying I just want to date as, recognizing me for the person that I am, and not for all the titles and all the things around it, or what it could afford you at some point.
Um, yeah, I would say to add on to all of that is that well, for me personally, like, when you're like I hate to say it like this, I'm just gonna say it real quick. When you're like a legacy, or when you have other people in your family who have been in the church, who have had other titles, and then the way people perceive you, if you're someone's child, grandchild, or whatever, they have a lot of times people just have a perception of you. It could be because, like, for me, I'm very, yeah, Amina and LaKesha know I'm very reserved, and because when you're raised in a certain way, or how people see you, you can't always allow people to just be in your space. So maybe you're more quiet, maybe you're more reserved, and so based off of you being reserved, then people think you're mean. And so when they think you're mean, they're like, well, I don't know really how to approach you. It's not that you can't approach me. It's just that I'm a watch to see what type of person you are before I just open up. And then also, like, because perception, I think that is the hardest thing about dating as a woman in ministry, is the perception. But then also, when you're in your boss mode, when people only see you in your boss mode, they have this perception like, okay, well, she's hard, she's or whatever, and she doesn't have a soft side, so she probably doesn't even like really talk to different people, or she only talks to whatever. And because when you're in a woman who's in power, ministry, whatever, you have to really be buttoned up. You have to have yourself placed so particularly in, like, in spaces, right? And then when you're dating me, I'm not that person all the time, like you said, Reverend Amina. Like, I like to do research. Like, I tell people I like to do research to calm down. So, like, I might like just like research dump on you because, like, I got excited about something, but I need you to know that's like my love language when I'm telling you all of this research that I found. So I think not just buying into a perception that I have to exude when I'm in a certain space, understanding that just because I'm like this, but that voiceover that's like, I'm like, you're like this, but you're also like this, but you're also like this. Like, I'm all kind of ways, but allow me to show you so that you can really see, who I am. Like, let me develop as a picture. Let the picture develop, and then decide, like, okay, yeah, I don't like that picture, and then we'll be fine.
And I think what you said is so, like, I think in song oftentimes. So I'm thinking of Lettucey's song "Pieces of Me," that there's so many facets to who I am. But when you see me, no matter what face you see, know that I'm blessed, know that I'm woman, know that I'm loved, know that I'm worthy. Like, just know that, and take the time to get the different pieces and faces of me. And not to be funny, but Reverend Amina, you was talking about spades. There are also some deal breakers with some of that as well. Uno was something that we have to throw in there. I think Uno has hurt many relationships, because I just was thinking about, like, I actually had a mini fight with somebody on a date because I'm like, listen, we got to get these rules right. Like, I don't know what rule you just came up with. Where did that come from? But understanding that we as women, and I think this is a powerful thing. I think everybody is, but women especially, we have intersectionalities that we don't even know about ourselves. And so are you willing to go on a journey with me where as I'm learning yours, that you're also learning mine, and we celebrate them. And yes, I love a good line dance. I love all the line dances, the cha-cha slide, all that stuff like that. I'm a soror, and so I do the steps. I love all those different things. Um, Oh, I see that. We're gonna hold on to that too. So I think that it's just really great. Again, it comes back to that conversation. Are you willing to invest a few moments of your time to get to know some of those facets and not judge them? And guess what? Many people, like even if you grew up in the church, right? Because I'm not a PK, but I was born and raised in the church, and I was born and raised underneath a particular pastor for the majority of my life. I still went to college. I still had time outside of church. So yes, I know what rap is. Yes, I know about hip hop. Yes, I know about weed. Like, like there's all. Listen, don't be frowning. I didn't say I did anything with it, but I've been exposed to these things. Don't act like I've been in some ivory tower, and I don't know anything. I'm not cultured, right? Because if we're really doing ministry, we have to be what the people are. So maybe I'm not a part of those things. I'm not doing them, but I know how to be in it. I know how to be okay with it. I know when to pull myself back, but I don't need you to do that, right? So if I say I really want to go somewhere, yeah. Oh, he's telling himself. So like really, like we really don't need to. I don't need you for that. I just need you to rock with me and roll with me because I already know what I like and what I don't like. I don't need you to protect me in that way. I know when I go to a restaurant what I can order and what I can't. So it's okay to get to know me just a little bit more. Um, Going back to RJ's question, and then we have one other question that I want to get to. What? How do you approach? How would a man approach you, or whoever wants to date you? How would you like them to approach you? So to not necessarily impact your ministry, if that's even a question. But how do you want to be approached? Forget about ministry for a second. How do you want to be approached as a woman in this season? And what is like? You know what? Your approach was off. I can't even rock with you.
You know what? I would say I'm more of a one-on-one type person because I am reserved and like a good conversation, honestly. If you can if you can kind of like I don't know, you have to I don't know, it's like a vibe. I don't want to say it's like a vibe almost type, but it is confident but not overly confident, being like a strong silent type, but then really approaching it and be willing to have a conversation with me and like really like listen, and we just kind of like connect and like see where the vibes go. Like if we have a conversation and we like the conversation goes from like one thing to the other and you stick with the conversation, then I'm like, oh, okay, that kind of thing, or really making it like giving me eye contact. I like eye contact because then I know that okay, you're talking to me specifically. You're not talking to like other people around, because sometimes I don't know when someone is flirting, so I need you to I need you to show me. But then what turns me off is like you don't have to tell me, like you don't have to specifically say, hey, I like big girls. If you're talking if you're talking to me in a way, then I'm gonna be like, okay, well, that. So if you say it, you can say it in a way without actually saying those exact words. That because sometimes like I don't want you to make it sound like, oh, okay, like because then I'm like, oh, okay, so you only like me because of that, or like that kind of thing. So it's really just like, can we have a really good conversation, and can you just like really kind of make me feel like, okay, yeah, that's the person. You saw me, you spotted me, you like kind of, and then you came over and you really were willing to say something. Because if my face looks like how it looks a lot of the time, resting face, and you still thought to come over and then you had a cool conversation, you got me.
But hold up, can we go back to something? Did somebody really come up to you and be like, "Yeah, I like big girls"? Hey,
Because you know what? Because it's not even that they just come up to you, like they'll sometimes they'll drop it, like, or they might be like, I don't like nothing small, or yeah, because I mean, yeah, you a good size, or that kind of thing. So you just they say stuff and you'll be surprised, but like
Like
someone,
it's a fetish.
yeah, like I'm not gonna say where I was or who it was. they're not in another non-denominations. But this, a man told me, he was like, you have a depressive bend over. Like he was telling me I could bend over far. Like I was able to bend over far. And so, so then it's like you don't know how to take those things. And, oh, thank you. And then you just kind of, walk away. So there's like sometimes they just say stuff and it's like maybe not say it in that manner,
I think that has like all of us speechless. Like that's wild. But like, so one of the things that I think is interesting, and this is probably gonna go like left field, but we're just gonna go there. It's like when married men like approach you. Because like I just look at my resume and I'm like, there's nothing on my resume that says like number 2. Like everything that I do, like I try to win at. And so I'm just like, what would make you think I want to be like number 2 in a relationship? Like in one of the most important aspects of my life, why would I want to be second place? Like you going home paying somebody else's bills, spending holidays with them, but you think like I want leftovers. And so I think like, if you're married, like maybe just know, like, yeah. But other guys, like, if you single out in these streets and, approach me with some respect, ask my name, talk like you got some sense, pretend like you've read English a couple of times, make me laugh.
Yeah, know some SAT and GRE words. I'm here for it.
Like all the conversation, but let me know that like if we have to go somewhere together, that I'm not gonna be like looking at the corner of my eye to see like who you talking to. That make sure you're not gonna embarrass me.
Yes, I think as well. I wasn't joking about the SAT or GRE words, but just have some linguistic prowess. Like be able to converse with me. Let's talk. Like yeah, okay, I'll leave that one alone. I can't. But there was a date that I went on, like the language was so tough. Like I couldn't get with it because everything was broken and he was loud and it was like almost like aggression. I was like, you know what, Lord, I've learned my lesson. I'm sorry, we're not doing this again. But also, I think another way to approach is with honesty. It's actually quite refreshing. Recently someone had approached me and he's like, I just had to get to know you because you're beautiful and I really appreciate how you presented this evening. I love your outfit. I love your smile. Can I get to know you? Oh, bet you by golly, wow, you sure can. Like, just the honesty and the respect of it all. You don't assume. And then one thing I say, don't approach me with, don't touch me. That's just, don't put your hands on me. Miss Martinique, I'll just say that my shape has been the topic of conversation several times, and I've had men that tried to have like come and give me a hug and try to touch on it. Don't do that. Immediately when you do that, I'm done. Because it makes my skin crawl. I have an issue with physical space. You have to be invited in. Like that is just not something that you get a right to just because you think that you brought me a drink, an appetizer or whatever, or I smiled at you. That's the other thing too. Just because I'm nice doesn't mean that I want you like that. I'm just being respectful. I'm being cool. But that doesn't mean that you then can come into my space, say whatever you want, and touch me. There's just a common holy hugs. Come on, sir. It's not holy if you're trying to grab my booty. That part. So no. No,
I will say, like, in that instance, like, I don't mind that people feel intimidated or whatever they like to call it, because like if you're gonna approach me on some BS, then don't. So like if you start to feel to yourself like, I don't know, then the answer is probably like no. Because if you're secure about who you are and if you're going to approach someone with respect, then there's nothing to be intimidated by. Because as we've all said, like we're women at the end of the day. It's not about the titles. But if you know you on some BS, that's usually where the intimidation comes in, because you know that whatever you're about to say or whatever you're about to try to do is just not, it's not going to go well. So yeah, if you're intimidated, then it's probably for a reason. But Amina?
Yes, please, run Amina.
I mean, so much of what you all have said has been, is definitely it for me. I mean, definitely with respect. And with respect, um, I definitely want you to also come to me as your own person. Like, don't feed me a line.
Mm.
Just be your real self. And if I can't play with you and your real self, then we're not going to work. Because I just need you real, because I don't know how you can be whole if you're not going to be real with me about where your strengths and your weaknesses are. And because I want someone who I can build with and I can grow with. And if I don't feel like I can grow with you, then and I know I have a very good sense of discernment. And so I can tell within having a conversation with you and within 5 minutes. And I also feel like that little tingling guy be like, yeah, that one, or no, I don't do it. And so, and it's very much a come to me with respect, but come to me authentic and come to me whole. And if you're just like, yo, let's learn together, great. I mean, I'm a nerd. Let's go to the library for a date. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, but seriously, let's really have a just be your most authentic self coming to talk to me. Because I like that the most. And even if you're just like, yeah, you know what? I mean, and I've definitely had guys have a conversation with me and be like, wow, you you heavy. Yeah, I am. Sure am. Sure enough.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
guess what? You know what? Tickle my brain by taking me. I'm in New York, so if you really want to get to me, tickle my brain by taking me to the Schomburg. Okay, I love you long time. I love museums and that Schomburg. Every time I go in there, I find something new. But it's okay. Let's do something different. Two quick questions. Well, the last question is not quick, but one quick question I want to slide in, remember, LaKesha, for everybody. Hey, you, them, or is it Dutch?
Who pays for what?
Dates.
Them.
I know, like, is that even a question?
You have to see your faces. You was like,
No, like, so, like, if you ask me out, then I definitely expect you to pay. And then but if I ask you out, then I will definitely offer to pay. Um so it might be, and that's like, I might be like, hey, do you want to meet up for lunch or whatever? And I don't mind like covering it. But if you ask me out on a date and then you think like we going half, then I'm more traditional. I'm not there. And if that's not your speed, then that just means that like we not going in the same direction. And that's cool, because there's somebody for everybody. That just means that you're not the one for me.
Yeah, I go by Emily Post on that. If you give it an invitation, also, then you pay. I also think, for me too, it's just like I definitely gone out on dates and like, because I date someone who is like, I will cover everything. That's great. So every now and then I'm just like, yeah, this check belongs to me. We're also at a different place in our relationship. But rule of thumb, whoever invited, like who you smelt it, you dealt it. Just go ahead. Whoever invited it, it should be the one. I think.
I like that. Okay, the last question, and don't y'all like throw anything at me as I ask it. Let's talk a little bit about sex and intimacy. Well, it's a two-part. One, are sex and intimacy the same thing? And two, how have the conversations gone for you in this season?
They're not the same thing, really. I mean,
Mm.
I would say, I think because you can be intimate with someone without actually being having sex or being in a sexual relationship with them. I think the intimacy is when you allow someone to see that other side, that softer side, when you're able to have conversations, uncomfortable conversations, and they just they you can be your full self with them, and then it has nothing to do with how your bodies actually touch. And because a lot of times you can have a sexual relationship with someone that's not intimate,
Mm-hmm.
because it's physical, and you're getting your needs physical, but when you actually need to talk to them about an intimate topic, then you can't, because they don't see you in that way. They see your body, they don't see your mind. And so the thing is, when you have someone who can see your body and your mind, when they can feed both, that's when, to me, you are with someone who's worthy of being in a relationship, someone who's worthy of actually dating you, and the way to have a conversation is to first understand, how did that person see me? Does that person only see me physically? Do they see me mentally? Do they see both? And when you understand that they see both, that's when you can have that conversation. Like, okay, I know that you really truly see me, and that this can be something. And then there's other times you're like, listen, you gonna be at that meeting? You going to the meeting? And they're like, I'm going to the meeting. Okay, well, after dinner, what you trying to do? That might be the conversation. We got to be real. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, to me, like I tell people, there's times when you have a craving for Taco Bell. Now, is Taco Bell the best food? No. But can you still have a craving for it? Yes. And when you have a craving for Taco Bell, you set yourself up because like, I'm not leaving the house. I'm not doing this because if I eat Taco Bell, this is all the things that's gonna happen after. So when you're just trying to meet with somebody physically, that's when you set it up. Like, hey, what you doing? Okay, you trying to come? Okay. Yes, the meeting. It could be the meeting. It could be like, hey, you coming to town or whatever. However the setup is, there's a conference, right? Because if we're real, we're really being real. We know that sometimes, after dark at conference, that's when you be like, I can't do this in my own town. But when I'm out of town at conference, I don't gotta be me. So I can, get that Taco Bell and eat it and take it to the room and do it, whatever. So it really is about, how they actually see it. And you have that conversation.
But you know what? Like, I'm gonna be real with you. Like, I think a lot of times, like, that happens because people are craving intimacy, and because you're not getting intimacy, you end up settling for sex. Yep. And because it's like, I want to be held, I want to be loved, like I want all those other things, and because I'm not getting them, then it's like, all right, you're gonna be at the meeting, like, yeah, well, I'm in rooms, but what you really want is like the intimacy. And I think that that's where not being able to date and to be able to fully express yourselves allows that confusion to come in, because now you're not able to build the relationship that leads to the intimacy that will get you to the sex, because you put all these constraints on what the church allows you to do, or what you put in your mind that you can or can't do as a woman in ministry, whatever. And then I think that's what leads to like all those sneaky links. I think it's what the young people call them, the sneaky links. But I think for me, and there is a difference between like sex and intimacy, because I tell people, like, I can have good sex with anybody. Like, that's not the problem for me. The problem is, like, how can I find somebody that I want to be intimate with, that I want to not just show my body to, but to show my soul to? And that's a bigger obstacle than finding somebody to have sex with. And guys think it's like, oh, we can have such good sex. And I'm like, that's not impressing me. Like, you saying like we don't have good, like, that's not impressive. Like, I know what I like, so I know it's gonna be good. What else do you bring to the table? What else do you have? And most of the time they looking like Taco Bell. Like, no, like, I'm good. Amina?
You're like, I'm gonna stay mute on this one. Okay, here she go. Okay.
Am I supposed to add on? No, what I will say, well, to answer the first question, of no, intimacy and sex are not the same. Because quite honestly, like, we can have a deep conversation and you can blow my collective mind, and I'll be like, "Whoo, boy, that was more." I also think, well, I'll say two quick things. I'm also one of those kind of people that, like, I mean, I just like to be selective. So, like, I mean, even if we've gone out on several dates, if I haven't had a dream about you or I'm not fantasizing about you, it's not going down here at all, because I'm like, I'm not wasting my good impressions on you. That sounds terrible to say that. I mean, because also my thing is like, because it's also like, if we get into an intimate act, if we have sex and you're just like, ooh, that was so wonderful, and I have to be like, well, it was just okay for me. I just don't see this more. I don't want us to have that kind of conversation. And I could have just stopped you ahead of time and been like, we're just not at that level, and it's just not going to work for me. But at the end of the day, I think that every woman that I know in ministry, at least the ones who aren't repressed, they want to have really great, amazing connections, and the good sex will come with it if they have that great and amazing connection. Yeah. And at the same time, if you know that you can't bring anything to the table besides something superficial, or you only want to meet up. Because I've told somebody, they were like, well, we can just be, I can be your conference boo. I'm good. Because every conference, if I want to have conference boos, then I will have a conference boo at every conference. I don't need to have you as my same token at every one. I can have variety too. But I do think that we really need to have a better conversation around healthy sex and healthy intimacy, because the fact is that a lot of us are repressed by how we think that sex should show up in our lives, especially as ministers and especially as church folks. Like if you have to watch some videos to get yourself together, then be honest with the person that you're talking to about the kind of videos that you want that get you where you need to be, or the kinds of extra things that might need to be coming to the bedroom to help you get where you need to be, or whatever your before or after activities and practices are. I think, and that goes back to our initial conversation around communication, because you can't have good intimacy or good sex with anybody who you ain't communicating with. Simple as that.
Right. And I think that, and it's important because, as RJ is saying, like, the church mothers are not going to be cool. But I think, like, we try to pretend like women are not supposed to enjoy sex. And I think that, like, that's one of the biggest issues, because I know so many married men who are pastors whose wives are not having sex with them, and they miserable. So they out here hoeing at every church conference because they trying to find somebody to do the things that their wives won't do, because their wives have this image in their head of what a first lady is. And the first lady does not do all those things that your husband wants to do. When if you get in touch with yourself, it's not about pleasing him. But if you're in a marriage or you're in a committed relationship, then it should be about pleasing each other, and you understanding what it takes for you to find pleasure. So then you're not having sex just because you're trying to make him happy. You're having sex because you're pleasing each other, because it's an act that should bring pleasure to both of you. And I think that until we get real about that conversation, then it's going to be a whole lot of church meetups, because people are trying to find that thing that they're not getting at home.
Right. Now let me add this too, just with that. We need to also recognize the divineness of sex. Like, I mean, why waste your anointing? I mean, your anointing goes in a lot of different ways. And sometimes you can have an anointed sexual encounter. And if you're not trying to like have an anointed sexual encounter in that way, where yes, you can back it up however you need to back it up with that person that you need to back it up with, because we are divine beings, then let's just don't squander it. Let's just be more honest about how we approach it, have more conversation about it, and just be open about the fact that even our church mothers, we had to get here somehow. I'm so tired of people being like our church mothers are like whatever and stuff, whatever. Some of them were freaks, and they just need to tell us and be real about the fact that they were and still are freaks now. But whatever.
They don't want to, right?
Conference meetup ain't new.
And let's talk about this. So, but then there's healthy love, right?
There is healthy love.
Please, Martinique, go ahead.
What LaKesha was saying about the first ladies, I've noticed. I'm not a clergy woman, but I've noticed for clergy women, especially when they get to a certain age, where they have to go into two categories. You either a nun, as in your previous life, it don't matter how much you got down, no matter how much you was fine and you was whatever. When you get to a certain point, now all of a sudden you're a nun and you're not a sexual being, and you're not seen like that. You're just like, okay, the Lord, I love the Lord, and all this kind of stuff. And then there's also the other where you're like, okay, well, I'm a pretty woman, so now I have to, people assume that I got it because I'm pretty and because of, my body. So I can only be in that category. And so we kind of put those, two categories too. But back to you saying, like, I would love to get some tips from the older women, like, because I'm trying to figure out how you got that one. Give me a tip, because I'm trying to get one, and you got him, and there's so many stories of like, where they would be like, okay, well, she was dating this person and that person, and she got this and she got that. I'm like, wait, tell me. You over here trying to be like, well, you should be married, but now I want to know what you were doing. I want to get a Benz too.
Let me tell you, I always think about it. I'd be like, you on your what marriage? I just want to know.
Right.
Like, how did that work? Like, where did that come from? Like, what was happening that like within this short time frame you got all these proposals? I just want to know. I mean, just I know some people just got it, but I just want to know how you closing the deal. I just want to know.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Listen, and then we talk about there's one. My phone is blowing up. Like all the text messages that are coming in right now. Like, what is you talking about? One thing I will say about healthy intimacy and sex is that, at least for me, I'm fortunate that I think I had some healthy models of it with my grandmother and my grandfather. Up until my grandmother and grandfather could not physically touch. There were times where you would see him help her in the car. Ooh, Ruby. And he would go ahead and pop her butt, stuff like that. And like, that's mine. And yeah, go ahead, Sam. You gonna get it. I'm like, wait a minute, grandma. Wait a minute. Hold on, grandma. But they were in their 80s and they still loved each other. And that's something that I think is so appealing, that even when physically I can't do what I used to do, there's still a level of intimacy that they've developed over time. And that's what I think that a lot of us want, right? And on the dating apps, if you're gonna go there and be honest, like sending me particular pictures of of pieces of you, that doesn't do anything for me, because I really do value intimacy. And one of them, he actually said some really interesting things. I'm like, listen, we're not going to weaponize that. And no, we're not doing all of that. We have to learn how to offer something more than just a body part. Like that, I need something more than that. And to have conversation is something that is like almost, I feel like it's invaluable, because some people just don't know how to talk. I said to somebody the other day, I said, you can FaceTime me and still say nothing. Like if the conversation is not there, and I think Reverend Amina, you sound a little bit like me. I am in my head a lot. So if you can't get in my head, and if you can't have that conversation where my mind is open, if we even remotely talk about even you coming into my space and hugging me, I'm already kind of like, because you have not stimulated my mind. You have not capped it. You haven't really gotten anywhere near my heart, my soul. So then you definitely not getting anywhere near me physically in that way. Because there's an exchange that takes place, and not everybody is really deserving of that. So that's right. I totally believe in the selectivity, but my phone is blowing up. Now, I don't know, Reverend LaKesha, we've been a little controversial tonight, but the second part of this question, someone texted me and said, well, is sex outside of marriage okay? I'm confused. RJ, we about to put you on Facebook timeout, but what do we say about that to people?
I'll be honest. I think that goes back to kind of your communication and your kind of what you feel is your particular boundary. For example, when I was in my 20s, when I was in high school, I thought I was going to be married by the time I was 25. And so for me, it was very much, I'm not going to test the waters until I find a person I want to be with. I am not 25 anymore. And quite honestly, for me, in my particular relationship, we had to have a different kind of conversation about, okay, so these are the things that I would like, and these are the needs that I would want. I also know people who are my age who say when they meet and they date somebody right now that they won't have sex outside of marriage. I think it's your particular preference to what you feel like you need. And I think that so long as, for me, I think that so long as you are, and this is my personal opinion, so long as you feel like the person that you are with is actually helping you in your own work. Remember, I think that sex is a divine act. And so if I feel like that person is meeting me in that divine space, then I'm cool with it. But that's for me and kind of where I feel like but I definitely feel like as you're a little older, I think sometimes the rules change. Like if you are post-marriage, if you are renewing things, I think you just need to set your own boundaries. I definitely just think that if you are younger, I think that sex is something you should save a little longer, only so that you can get to know people. Because once you start and once you get to that point, then it's never going to stop. And you sometimes then start to confuse sex with intimacy. And I think that becomes some of the conversation. So if you have had sex with somebody on the first date, then you don't get ever a chance to get to know them intimately. But I definitely feel like even too, if I started to date somebody fresh today, we gonna wait. I'm gonna be like, these are the things that I think that these are my particular boundaries. This is what I want in terms of how our relationship will progress. But you definitely aren't gonna get on the first night. And if you think you're gonna get in the first whatever, then, or you have a time frame in your mind about when it's gonna happen, then we're not supposed to date. That's just not where we are. So, but that's kind of where I feel like I think it's to each your own and how you feel like it and however you feel connected with God around how that's dictated in your life.
I would agree with I think I think you have to kind of determine, but I think when you're younger, because this is something my mom taught us, is that you need to know your body. You need
Mm-hmm.
to know how your body responds and what stimulates you and how you feel about different things before you become intimate in general. Because if someone does something when you're, especially when you're younger,
Mm-hmm.
and you are aroused, then you immediately think, okay, well, I'm supposed to go all the way with that person. And that's not, it could, because when you're learning your body,
Mm-hmm.
people always joke, oh, the air can come in, the cold air can breathe, and I can feel something. But you have to understand how your body reacts, and you have to understand your own sensuality. I think we don't talk about that, the sensuality of our body. Because if we are divinely made, that means that the way that we react to different things is also a process. He clearly understands that we will be aroused by certain things and how our bodies are. And so what we have to do is realize that that doesn't have to control us, and that because we need that feeling, it doesn't have to be because of someone else. We first understand it. And then Reverend Amina said, when you start to get older, you have different seasons in your life, you realize that, you know what, I I need a connection in this manner for me to feel a certain type of way. So if that's what you need, then that's what you do. And it might not be within the parameters of marriage, because because when you, we could go into a whole thing about what marriage is and why marriage is structured this way and why they tell us we have to wait for marriage, and then there's so many other things. So when we really look at all that kind of stuff, some stuff doesn't go together if we really think about it, the conservative ideas that we have. That's a whole other thing, but it's a whole thing. But really, it's about knowing your body first, and then deciding, okay, now that I know that this excites me, do I want it to be including someone else? And so, and because I'm at a point in my life where I don't necessarily know that I'm gonna get married. So if I don't know if I'm gonna get married, does that mean I'm gonna be waiting forever? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, no. So,
Say no, no. Yeah, well, I obviously have a 17-year-old without a husband, so I obviously believe in sex outside of marriage. But I will say that, as Martinique said, like as you get older, your decision making changes. Like, because intimacy, especially from a woman, we are receivers. And so when I think about having sex, I think about the fact that I'm receiving someone into my body. And I don't want everybody's energy in my body. And so that makes my decision making differently. Do I want to not only be intimate with you, to share my soul with you and to share my spirit with you, but do I also want you to deposit into me? And a lot of guys don't get that because they think like, oh, I'm so wonderful. And it's like, yeah, but your energy is bad. And I don't want to carry that with me. And so just because we might have great conversation, that still doesn't mean that I want to be intimate with you. I want to be physical with you. And so I think that as you get older, and as Amina and Martinique said, and you get to know yourself, not just your physical body, but you know your spiritual self, and you know who you are and what you're worth, then your decision making about who you allow to have access to that changes. And so, yeah, it's some of us, like I tell people, like I was a party girl in my 20s, like I was living my best life, but who I was then and who I am now are not the same person. And so just because of who you thought I was or who I used to be doesn't mean that I'm still that same person. And I don't think that we allow people to mature and to grow. So a lot of times people may think that, oh, well, I know this about you and you used to do, like, all right, just because you knew that doesn't mean that that's where I still live. And so, and I think that so often women feel as though like they can't have a past, or that their past has to define them and who they are. But it's like, nah, sis, like you can grow, you can mature. And just because you used to say yes to a lot of stuff doesn't mean you have to keep saying yes to those things.
Yep. And I think the other thing, just the way I can summarize it, because I've been thinking about my experience, especially with the season that I've just come out of over the past year. I've had seasons. I think in all things you have to ask God. That's where discernment comes in. I don't want to make it sound churchy or preachy, but I've had seasons, even when I was with my ex-spouse, where God is like, you need to pull back, you need to remove yourself because the energy, the spirit is not right. And so, no matter who you're with, and it's not even about sex, if we're getting to that, then we've had to come to a place of intimacy. That's a standard for me. Not everybody does that. We kind of flip it on its head, but I know I want it a particular way. But if we're talking about that, if I do not feel safe, or if God is saying pull back or move forward, I have to go in that way. And it has nothing to do with for me, at least wanting to have that physical connection. But if I cannot be intimate with you, if I can't have conversation with you, I already know for me that that is going to be a mess. And so sometimes God has given us some signals and some guidance before you even get to the part of, do I want to lay down with this person? He's already probably told you about 16 things where it's like, nah, sis, don't do that. Or nah, bro, don't do that. Because it's not just about that physical act. And I think that when we start to have conversations about what sex is, what intimacy is, what marriage is, we have to start. If I'm honest, maybe that's a whole nother talk, Reverend LaKesha, that we need to unpack the definitions of these words, because it means a whole lot. And, having, even being a youth educator, when I was in high school, I was a peer educator, and the pressure that was put on girls to not dress a certain way, to not let men do this, or let boys do this, let boys do that. Or, there's first base, second base, third base, and home base, and all these things. Some of that stuff stays with us even as we're adults. We need to start to unpack some of these words and understanding what they mean, and understand that it's not about having sex outside of marriage. It's about being obedient to God, because he probably already told you something about that person, and he shouldn't have even been in your space.
Right,
So we have to have a relationship with him, but I'll be quiet.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you just said, like, the ownership is not always on the woman. Like, what I wear does not give you permission to be out of line with me, because I think that men also have to recognize that you have to have self-control as well. Just because you see something you like, as Martinique said, you don't eat everything that you want to eat if you know that it's not good for you. Just because you see it doesn't mean that you get to taste it. And sometimes, like, you just got to think to yourself, that looks really good, and keep walking. You don't have to be inappropriate, but we make it seem like, women, and women have to dress so modestly. Like, yeah, like, you want to have all the parts covered, but some women have shapes. Some women have hips, they have breasts, and that doesn't mean that I want to wear a dress that makes me look like a box just so that men don't have to exercise self-control. It's not my job to make you exercise self-control. You should do that yourself. And I think that too often women we carry the burden of trying to make sure that men don't behave inappropriately when that's not our responsibility.
Like, even, I remember, I'll never forget, there was a meeting where it's like, oh, you can't wear certain earrings, don't wear ankle bracelets, don't wear this, don't wear that. I'm like, what is that? I don't understand why. Because guess what? If you're going to say something or do something, that's not going to make or break it. You already have had the thought, you've already felt some type of way, and you're going to come and you're going to do it anyway. Or I've been told several times, oh, well, Reverend Tiffany, you're shapely, you shouldn't wear that. Or, people are going to perceive you wrong. I'm like, listen, whether I cover it up or not, you still got something to say. So why don't I just live my life? I'm gonna live my best life and go buy this nice bodycon dress and rock it. Okay, I'm gonna put the fire high on underneath, but I'm gonna look fly. So I just don't. I think we as a women as well, we have to encourage each other to walk in your purpose, walk in power in whatever it is that you're doing, and know that you are worth the respect and the honesty and the integrity that comes along this journey of dating. And it's okay to be like, no, thank you. Just because it's offered doesn't mean I need to accept it. And I think that that's something else that we have to even teach our young girls, is that, yeah, you think I'm cute, but guess what? There's about 10 of y'all that think I'm cute too, and they might want to drink my bathwater. It's okay. Yes, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm going back to the color purple. But we have to be okay with that and saying, oh, and I'm not promiscuous or anything else like that, but I know my worth, and everybody that comes along does not get to ride the ride. they don't get to come along for the journey, and that's all right. So how do we even, I know that might be another talk as well, but how do we start to prepare our young girls to have these conversations? Like, what are those things that now that we're thinking and we're going through it now in our particular season of life, what will we tell our young girls so that they won't have to go through the same struggles and they come out a little bit more empowered?
Right.
But I'm gonna leave it
Yeah,
right there.
I would love to hop in very quickly and just say that I think that for us, we really need to have a conversation with our young people in general and
Yeah.
just say, because I do think that at one point, especially, I mean, the way that we talk about intimacy and sex and how we talk about into the covenants. And I say that sex is divine for a reason, because I think that God made sex to be great. But I definitely think that you have to recognize that is an exchange, as LaKesha said, that it is an exchange of spirit, and you are also becoming one with someone every time you do it. And it doesn't matter what kind of sex you have and how it goes. And we have to be really realistic about it. I think we just need to have honest conversations with our young people about not only sex, but gender and sexuality and what that looks like and what intimacy looks like in all of those levels. And I think that for us to think about and say, okay, well, I just want to tell them to honor themselves and value themselves in this one way, because that's the way, as we mentioned at the top of this, that the ideals were in the past, doesn't mean that those ideals are the same now. And we need to be very realistic about all that they're also experiencing in the world too, so that they can also say, okay, so even if I identify in this way, however I show up in my gender and in my sexuality, that I still have to respect the intimacy and I still have to respect what sex looks like, because the rules aren't different just because I show up this way. And we need to be able to facilitate containers and facilitates brave spaces for people to be able to have those conversations. And so that's what I would say for our youth, instead of just saying we're going to just drop. And also too, I think we assume that our youth don't have values, as if we haven't been teaching them. And but by the time 13, 14, 15-year-olds come around, they already have kind of embedded, they have an embedded understanding of what you have already taught them, as well as what they agree with or what they disagree with, in terms of that. And it may not all be the same in kind of how we do it. Like my parents have been married for 40 some odd years, almost 50 now. My grandparents, before my grandfather passed away, they were married for 60 some odd years. So this is, but they're even still with their way. And when they were talking about dating and how they found each other and how things worked for them and how that all related, my grandmother and my granddaddy were like elementary school sweethearts. My dad and my mom were college sweethearts. So, but their way of dating and their ways of life look different. But when I went to college and when I went into other ways, I had the values that they talked about for me. And I also was able to say, okay, so based off of all the things that they've said and all the things that I've learned and how I'm doing, this is how I do it. And we need to let youth know that it is okay for them to say, this is what this looks like for me, and that they should be able to have that autonomy, and that they don't need to have all these heavy do's and don'ts placed on them just because we feel like these are all the rules. We need to be able to say, let's have a healthy conversation about it. Now, I know that may not be the way that other people feel, especially as church goes. We feel like, oh, everybody should have a do's and don'ts. But even if we go back to like Deuteronomy and look at all of the rules and things that they have, there are a lot of loopholes in those rules. And a lot of those rules were written for specific circumstances. And we need to just be willing to be open to have conversations. And if it challenges us to have a conversation, or we feel like in our own value system, we can't have that conversation, we need to be bringing other people in to have those conversations with our youth. Instead of just being like, we're not going to have that conversation, because we can't avoid some of the stuff that teenagers and even younger are being already exposed to. And we need to be able to have a conversation about it, because if we don't have the conversation about it, somebody's going to teach them. But that's the horse that I will ride in and out on every single time, because I think that we just need to be able to have more conversation and to say, you know what, it's our job to help say, we're going to open the conversation, we're going to have it. And this is what I think. And I respect where you are, because as you are forming to be an adult, and you are going to be forming to be an adult, I don't think that as a teenager, you should be overly sexualized. I think you should preserve your childhood. But I do think that you need to have these conversations, just as you know that as your body is changing and these things come up, you have already made decisions about how you want to observe it, so that you're able to function as well as possible, not only in the world and in ministry, but also within yourself and your household.
So it sounds like Reverend Amina is gonna come back and leave that talk. But I think I have a 12-year-old and I have a 9-year-old. Well, my 12-year-old is about to be 13. But I think that one thing, and then I know we're gonna wrap up, is that as I've had these conversations, again, something that God has impressed upon me is, am I teaching them to have relationship because with God? Because there will be times where they're gonna have to make some decisions where I'm not gonna be there. So am I exposing them to these conversations? Am I having these conversations with them myself? Am I praying over them? Am I covering them? Not trying to make over, but I want them to have a relationship like, okay, God, I see that. Can you help me? Because I'm not gonna always be in their presence. And I also think that we have a duty as a church, as a community, to teach our children, because it's not if, it's when they're going to teach them the sex ed videos, all the things that they're being exposed to, the stuff that I've heard even my 9-year-old say to me. I'm like, how you know that? And she's a girl. So mommy is really like, hold up. What you talking about? No diggity, no doubt. She knows all the words to the song. I'm like, where'd you learn that? Like, but so I have to have the conversations, and I want to make sure that they have, even as a young age, have a relationship with God so they can ask their own questions. They have a community that surrounds them to ask questions and not judge them. Because guess what? Netflix is full of stuff. All these things are full of all these things where they're being exposed. So if we're not going to talk about it, then we're leaving it to the world and to everybody else to tell our children what it means to have sexuality, what it means to identify with gender, or whatever the case may be. And then you may not necessarily agree with or like with what they're being taught, but have you even spoken to them? No, most times not. But anyway, we digress, but we also gave another opportunity for another conversation. I want to say thank you to these beautiful women. Thank you for your transparency. Thank you for your honesty. Because I know this is a tough conversation to have. I know my phone is gonna blow up some more probably tomorrow morning with some questions and like, how did you talk about this? But again, the way that we overcome is through our testimony and through our conversation. And somebody was blessed by having this conversation, because the dating streets are a little interesting, but they're manageable. I want people to be encouraged to continue to look, to continue to pursue God and pursue yourself first before you are out there in these streets. One thing I'll leave you with, and think about this. R.C. Blake, who's a minister from Louisiana, he said this. He said, men pursue and women approve. So think about your role in this dating season and be okay with whatever it is, and think about what you want and what you don't want. I hope we've given you some nuggets to take you through. Our next talk is coming up in July. I don't want to give the wrong date. We are looking at July 17th, and we're calling it Being Intentional with Love, where we'll hear the stories of couples in ministry that have come together. And we're going to talk about how God was involved, or maybe not, because we kind of touched on that a little bit. We kind of out here in the streets, but God blessed it, amen. And what are those things that they would give to those of us that are looking for that? Not everybody out here dating is looking for marriage, but there's a lot of us that are. And so, how do you prepare yourself with those questions that you ask yourself? And just, we're going to come together next time to be encouraged by these couples. So please join us in July. Please stay tuned to looking at Rethinking Church TV for more talks and events. I thank you, Reverend LaKesha, for this platform. Thank you for opening these doors. Everybody have a great night, and we'll see you at part 3. When do the brothers get to talk? I don't know. RJ, I don't know. We might be put on timeout. That's up to Reverend LaKesha. We might have to ask her. But everybody have a great night. We love you. Have a good one.